Here, folks. All right, welcome to the October
Chris,
28th,
before you start,
2004.
let Hillary know so they can turn.
Pardon me?
Are we on?
I don't know. Are we on yet? Okay. All right. Let's start this off, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the October 28th, 2024 Newmarket Budget Committee. We are starting a moment late. It's now 6:32, and let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and led by Brian Hickey.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the first order of business is an amendment to the agenda. The agenda that I had set out earlier identified the schools as fiscal year 25, which is incorrect. This is the final report, Q4 fiscal year 24, and we added the CIP report by Brian Rowley, who's our CIP representative, and Jenna from the school board is also, school committee is also going to present the school committee CIP report. So if we'll accept those adjustments to the agenda. A second motion for that?
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Brian. Motion made by Brian Rowley, seconded by Ned Carpenter. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous. Okay. Before we move on to that, we'll just quickly take the agenda for the stenographer. Chris Wolf here. Chris Blackstone is excused. Ned Carpenter.
Here.
Tim Choi is not here. Scott Foster.
Here.
Justin Lucer is excused. Brian Hickey.
Here.
Danielle Honan.
Here.
Brian Rowley.
Here.
Dan Smith.
Here.
And Brian Ward.
Barely, but yes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. All right. There we go. We got all that stuff worked out. I'd like to open public session. It is now 6:34. Seeing no one from the public visiting, we'll close public session at 6:34. Now, I'd like to welcome Jenna to come and talk to us about the year-end fiscal year 24 for the school board.
Okay, great. Thank you for having us here tonight. I did want to start with an apology. We had anticipated to having our Q1 financials ready for you, and it feels like it's been a long time since I created those. It's been like a month, but we had to make some shifts with the school board agenda to address budget. So our October 17th meeting was for budget, not for regular business, so it got pushed off. So I can't give them to you tonight because I have not yet presented them to my board, and that's something we always try and do first. But if it's okay, as we will be presenting them on the 7th, and I can email them to this committee after I've presented to the board, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So starting off, this is, I think the last time I met with you, we had an estimated fund balance to reduce taxes that I shared with you. It was in advance of doing the financial statements. That number hasn't changed. It was $470,889. These are the financials that support that, that information. So I'll just kind of go through quickly, kind of hitting the categories of the report. If anyone has a question, just stop me, raise your hand, and we'll go from there. So this is the Q4 financials ended June 30th of 2024. We break it down the same that we normally do into categories. We have expenditures and revenues. So on the expenditures side, we ended the year with an unexpended expenditure balance, it's a mouthful, of $743,500. That means that of the amount we appropriated, that amount was unexpended. On the revenue side, we had, for the year, we had some additional revenues beyond what we had budgeted for. One of the key factors was our earnings on investment. We had a 300% positive variance there due to the interest rates. So that was a welcome surprise. We also had some tuition. We had a mid-year placement of an out-of-district student that came into our school system, so another school district paid us for that. That was an unanticipated amount of about $18,000. And then we had a premium holiday on our health insurance that was around $20,000. So those are kind of our local revenues that were variances. The state revenues are basically our adequacy and our SWEP, which is the statewide education property tax. I have a little blurb to tell you about that a little bit later on in the report. And then our federal revenues, as you recall, all federal revenues are 100% offset by federal expenditures, so they don't have a taxation impact. They always fully offset one another. Sorry, my throat's a little sore here tonight.
Take a shot.
So the way that we report this information to the state is a form, it's called the DOE 25. There's also a Department of Revenue form that goes along with that that we prepare, and it basically, we take everything from the year, we enter it into this workbook, and they mine data from that workbook. So just in a nutshell, the fund balance, which is what we're able to turn back to offset taxes, in a nutshell, it's basically what's left over after we finish the year. So it's made up of revenues, additional revenues we received, unexpended expenditure balance, anything that's left, and then there are some standard accounting adjustments that our auditors make relative to transfers between funds that happen at the end of the year. And you kind of boil all that together and it will give you that $470,889 number that I mentioned before. So that's kind of the details of that. Our food service program had a great year. We started the year with a positive balance, due 100% to waivers for free meals that happened during COVID. We started out at 121,000, but our food service program actually, at the end of the year, and due to increased student utilization, and also due to some supply chain assistance grants that we were able to get from the state, we ended the year at a positive $154,000 balance. So we're only allowed to carry forward up to 3 months of an operating budget. So we're going to be looking throughout this year to do some pretty exciting things with food service to kind of spend down that balance. We're hoping to have, they call them pop-up chef events, where we get a guest chef from our food service management company that will come in and do a different kind of meal that we don't normally present in our cafeteria. One of the items, they're doing a pulled pork kind of pop-up event. So we're going to try and do several of those throughout the year to bring that in for students to do. We also are enhancing some of our equipment. We've ordered some new carts and some new trays and some delivery things for our facilities for our food service program to do. And then lastly, we're looking at some facilities improvements in between our walk-in freezer and our walk-in refrigerator at both buildings. They're right close together, and so in the past we've sometimes seen condensation. So we're looking at some remediation of that. So we anticipate that we will have spent down that balance by the time we get to the end of this year.
So just a question on how the food service works. Obviously, during the pandemic period, the government was paying for all the food, all the meals. So everyone was getting fed, regardless of your income situation or anything like that, or whether you paid. I'll just say there's been, discussions, and this is just, out there, discussions that I've picked up on where they're talking about, I know that when my kids were in school, they had a school credit card they would pay, and then we would put money into a balance in order to cover the expenses and so forth. And discussions about children whose family don't have the funds to pay for that. And there was just issues with balances not being settled and, children not getting fed and things of that nature. Is there some policy on that or anything like that, just so we understand how it works?
First of all, do not see which kids have free or reduced meals. They just simply say, yep, they took a meal, yep, they took a breakfast. So it's no different for any of those kids. However, at the end of the year, as you alluded to, we have some families that, for whatever reason, either they can't pay, or they, their situation has changed, and so we have a significant balance. And part of what we are required to do as a school district in order to participate in the free and reduced program, we have to do collection efforts, and we have an entire policy that outlines all the steps that we have to take to try and collect on that debt. We email after 2 weeks, then we have to send a letter, then we have to send a more increasing severe letter, and then finally the last bit in the policy says that we could take people to civil court. I want to tell you that as long as I'm upstairs, I'm never going to recommend that we take that. I don't know if many of you saw in the news, there was a district in New Hampshire that did decide to take people to civil court for food service debt, and the public backlash was fierce, and definitely not something that I think I would be comfortable doing. I do my job, but I just don't think that, I think when it comes down to feeding kids and educating children, you're educating the whole kid, and if they need food to be, nutritious food to learn, then that's what you do, because you can't, every kids don't learn. So we do have a policy. It's on our policy library. It's policy page 8, and it basically goes through all of those different requirements. It's actually under review right now. We're making some tweaks to it. Some of them to take out some archaic language and things like that. We operate our food service plan much like we talked about. We don't have a card, but parents have an account. Parents can put money. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
Can you repeat everything you said for the last 15 minutes? I can hear you.
No, I can't. So parents do load money on an account. They can do it one of two ways. They can go online. We have a program called My School Box, and it's very convenient and easy for parents to do that, but they charge a per transaction fee to families, which for some, the cost of a lunch is $3 every time you try and do that. So we also accept in-person payments at no cost or fee. They can do a check or a cash payment at the cafeteria. So that's kind of, I hope I answered your question there.
So in that, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so if I understand this correctly, we have $154,000 excess.
It's a
And we have families that have not been able to pay, and we can't use that 154,000 toward that?
So we can use it in certain ways, but I want to explain to you that prior to us getting those free COVID meals, our program ran at a deficit every year. It ran, we budgeted a $35,000 to a $40,000 transfer from the general fund to food service every year. So we're trying to be we're grateful for the positive balance, but we're also trying to be respectful of the fact that, I budgeted a lesser amount this year, knowing I have that, but at some point we will run out of that because we will have to pay off. We have to make the food service. It's a nonprofit account, so every year if it runs a deficit, we have to make it whole. So over time, I think it's going to gradually go down. We're trying to be as responsible as we can to serve the needs of the students in the district, but also mindful of taxpayers, because if we exhaust it all in 1 year, paying for debt, then carrying forward, it looks like a big up in our budget, and we always try to smooth things out. But we are looking at some of those things. Like I said, we went down from, I think it was 134 to 121 the year before this, and that's kind of the trajectory that we expect. But we got some additional grant funding last year that allowed us to offset some of it, which is why it went back up again. It's not purely based off utilization. It was grant funding we received. That grant funding has gone away, so we do expect that we will see a gradual decline over time in the food service program back down to, we always hope to try to run it in the positive, but in truth and practicality, very few districts in the state are able to maintain that.
Yeah.
Um,
So if there's a balance at the end of the year, what happens to that money?
That money cannot be used to offset taxation, it cannot be used in any other way, it can only be used back into your food service program in some way.
Thanks, Ned.
So
Dan Smith?
2 points, just in addition to what Jana is saying. Newmarket is an exceptionally big-hearted and generous community where our students and feeding our students is concerned. So I wanted to point out, one, every year I've been on the board, we have had donations, usually anonymous, from members of the community who have been exceptionally generous in contributing toward paying off school lunch debt for our students who've been unable to pay. And then we'd be completely remiss not to mention the N68 Hours of Hunger program, which does tremendous work. I can't say enough good things about it, to make sure that students, not only are they fed breakfast and lunch on the days when we have school, but the weekend days when they don't have school in 68 hours, make sure that those students go home with food so that that's what 68 hours means. It's the time between school lunch on Friday and school breakfast on Monday morning. So, we'd be remiss not to mention those things. This is an exceptional community when it comes to looking after our kids.
What's the average shortfall on what's left that people don't pay? Total, not per person, but like annually. So at the end of the school year.
So are you saying, what's the average negative we have in our food
Exactly,
service
yes,
balance?
right.
It's typically about $35,000 to $40,000 a year, in pre-COVID, right? Some years it's been less, some years it's been more, but that's kind of a good ballpark of, and what we do is we add that as part of our operating budget. We literally budget for a transfer to food service. So when we raise and appropriate the money, we already have the money there thinking that we're going to need it to transfer.
We have like 1,000 students, is it?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
about.
1,000
about right.
students,
900
and
and
it's,
change.
and it's $3 a meal, is that what you're saying?
It's different at different buildings. The pricing's up on our website. Now you got me here. I think it's $3.50 at the high school, and I think it's $3.15 at the elementary, but don't hold me to that. They have different pricing structures.
That's like 12,000 meals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We do about 30,000 meals a year.
yeah, so it's a third of it. That's a significant thing. I was gonna ask about whether, because one of the things that I heard about that was that community that was pursuing people was also saying they couldn't, because people were willing to, put in some pretty significant checks, as Dan implied, and, it seemed like that was not permitted. So,
That is not how we have approached it. We will take any donation at any time to offset food service debt. I don't know the specifics of why that decision was made in that community. Whether it was politically motivated, I'm not really sure. But I know, like Dan says, every year we have some very, very generous anonymous people that just send us a check and say, apply this to families with delinquent accounts. And so we have a whole process for doing that. We involve our social workers and our principals, and we determine which, we don't ever just do it for one student. We find as many as we can benefit with that money. I don't make the decision about where the money goes. It's something that's done by the social workers and the principals, but we will gratefully take any donation anybody has for student debt.
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
That's good to know. Thank
And if you have any political clout up at the state, there's a program to advocate for. So after food service, we are going on to, we have some other types of structures and financial pieces in our district. We have impact fees available to us, which are, it's a vehicle that the town established years ago as part of their, their plan. And so when a new house or a new organization, a new development is made, there are certain impact fees. They're distributed throughout the town, different departments in the town. You folks have probably heard of that before. And the school district gets a portion of that. So we have 5 years from the date that it gets credited to us to use it. So we track that and we make sure that we use those things. We actually will be doing a withdrawal of some impact fees to address the courtyard. We just finished that this year, so you'll see that in the next year. We have capital reserves and expendable trusts. I'm excited to present to you our capital improvement plan a little bit later tonight, but those capital reserves that are specific to facility improvements are a key part of our whole plan, and we have done taken a really deep look, and we've projected out 20 years of what we think we need to do. So I'm excited to share that with you, but those play a big part in how we're trying to level tax rates, right? We don't want spikes, we don't want valleys. We want to make sure that we know what we're going to have over the next 20 years. We fund it appropriately. The balances in those accounts may go up, but then we do a roof and it goes back down. But we always want to be planning to level it as best we can. We recently closed out our bond fund, which was the last remaining funds from the building expansion projects. There were a couple of options that were presented to the board. They could use it for a project that had been left on the, for lack of a better word, cutting room floor as part of the building project, but we felt that we pretty much had met the mark of the building project. The other use is you can take that amount and you can apply it to your principal payment on the bond. And that is what the board elected to do. So part of our December payment that we'll be making in a couple months actually a month now, will consist of the closing out of that fund, which is sitting as a revenue. So that'll be a little bit of help when we come into the end of next year.
What was you saying? You're saying that funding was established for the construction of the expansion of the buildings.
Yep.
And each of those, you got a list of projects that were completed, and now you're basically saying everything's done, and
Yep.
the residual capital is left over.
Yep.
You then apply to the bond.
Yep, that's right. Well, what it does is we've already budgeted for the full bond payment in our expenditure budget. So this will come in as a revenue, and what it will do is at the end of the year, when we take the what's left, it will offset. It'll become part of the fund balance that goes back to taxes, because we've already budgeted to pay for our bond payment. So we're earmarking it to use it for that purpose. So we will underspend general fund on the bond by using this money to offset. Okay?
Anything else, any questions on that?
So, and then that kind of, all the charts, of course, are at the back, and I thought I would take specific about that. But then what I try and do is give you an idea of what's upcoming. So keep in mind this was, at the end of June, but there were a couple of things that we were keeping our eye on. One was a House Bill 1279. It had been introduced by the House, and it would permanently restore 7.5% of the retirement contribution for teachers. We never thought it was going to make it as far as it did. It made it to April of last year, and they've put it into a committee for study. It hasn't technically been killed, but I think it's highly unlikely at this point in the legislative cycle that it will pass. But maybe it'll come back up again in another cycle, and that would be nice.
So I actually looked that up and see what happened. The House did pass the bill, the Senate recorded it, so it was stuck.
Yeah, and it's still in interim study since April. Yeah. Yeah. Whether it comes out of interim study.
That's the soft no.
Yes.
Bill's going to
Yeah.
die.
Yes.
Yep.
Kick the can down.
New Hampshire Retirement has set their new contributions rates for 26 and 27. They set them biennially, so it's every 2 years they'll set the rates. So starting July 1st, we have some new rates. We've seen a slight variance downward for the first time in quite a while for both teacher and employees, not a windfall, 0.78% down on teachers and 0.41 down on employees, but still, we'll take anything anything in that regard as a win. And then, again, back to the food service, we had a really exciting opportunity. For the first time, I think, in Newmarket history, we were approved to participate in something called the Fresh Fruits and Vegetables Program. It is geared based on free and reduced application rates. It's targeted just at our middle school. That was the only group, the demographic group that met. But what it allows us to do, we get $14,000. And what we can do is we take that and we can provide fresh fruits, vegetables, healthy snacks right in the classroom. Trays go right in. Doesn't matter whether you're free, reduced, or paid. Every child can go up and help themselves and have access to the fresh fruits and vegetables. And right now we're doing it twice a week. We hope to increase it to 3 times a week as we get further into the year. I will tell you, the first one we served was watermelon, and I think all we got back was rinds. So they definitely like it. The teachers like it, and they're doing a great job to support it in their classrooms and giving kids some extra nutrition during the day. So, good program. On as far as adequacy aid, we talked about this a little bit earlier. We talked about how adequacy aid and SWEPT are the 2 state revenues that make up the majority of our non-local funding for education. Adequacy aid is what I like to call the good one, because that comes from somewhere else in the state. It comes from the sin taxes like alcohol and lottery and things like that, but it's not raised and appropriated on the backs of taxpayers based on property tax. SWEPT is still it's still considered a state tax, but unfortunately it is raised right here. It's raised here, it's held at the town hall, and then the town pays us. So when you take those 2 together, if you want one of them to go up faster than the other, you want adequacy aid to go up, and you'd love SWEPT to come down. And so I've kind of shared with you on page 7 a little bit of a chart that I think is kind of telling. The red, I hope you have yours in color. Do you have them? Okay, good. The red portion of those bars is what's raised from taxation. That's the SWEPT, right? So if you look at fiscal year 23, see how small that red bar is? And then look at the next year, look at how big it got. That was when we felt that right here. Not because if you look at the total amount of the adequacy aid that we received, it wasn't wildly different if you look at the total length of the bar. But what they did is they flip-flopped the rate between the SWEPT and the adequacy aid. More than we had in 23. It started to go back up. It's our estimated 2025. We now have final rates for that, and I think they are roughly what's shown here. I can't remember the timing of that. We will be getting our fiscal year 26 rates on November 15th, so that'll help us as part of the budgeting process. And again, it's an estimate. They do that in the fall, and then they come back in the spring, and then they give us another estimate, but we don't get the final rates until September-ish of the next year. And down at the bottom in the orange, you can kind of see the history. This is the sum total of the aid that Newmarket has gotten, and you can kind of see how it goes up and down. And that's really challenging to budget for because it's such a big component of our aid, and it has nothing to do with anything that we can control. So obviously when it goes down, it means we have to raise more money here locally, and when it goes up, it means we can manage things a little bit better, but it's something that's beyond the control of the district. So after that, I think the rest is just the statements and the explanation of variables, or variances rather. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions on specifics? Okay. All right. All right, well, thank you very much.
As I mentioned earlier, thank you for the detail that you provide, and thank you for, the embedded, notes and additional information and explanation.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I'm looking at these and I'm reading them, and then it's like, I wonder what that means. And then it's like, oh, okay, it's right over here. So it's really helpful. Thank you. Very good. All right. Would you like to take a break, or would you like to move into the CIP for the schools?
I can come back. Brian, did you want to do anything preface what we're talking about, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk briefly about that, and, we'll get into more detail on the overall CIP piece, but, yeah, I mean, I think everybody here is familiar with the capital improvement program and what its aim is, and, we've had only one meeting so far since my time, when I walked in my photo, it's covered by our computer. And, so we focus on the town for that one meeting, and get to review the school items. I think it's very nice to share some of the items with us today.
So the story on the school side is 2 years ago, this is our second annual summary. 2 years ago, we actually had a group that came in and they went through the fine-tooth comb. They were up on our roofs, they looked at our equipment, and they helped us develop a plan based on the age of our structures, based on the age of our equipment, that we then were able to say, okay, when do we actually think, looking out 20 years, we need to, I feel bad, that's kind of tiny print. I wish I had paper copies for you, but you'll share this, right, Brian?
Yeah.
So what we did is we created a big detailed sheet that showed basically every roof, every piece of equipment, all of our HVAC, and we scheduled out when we thought these things would need to be replaced. Then we took a look at the funding that we had in our capital reserves. We looked at what we would need in order to make those repairs when those days came. And we came up with a strategy, a two-part strategy. The first part is we are going, in order again to level tax rates, every year we're going to put on a warrant article to put a certain amount of money into capital reserve. Last year it was $200,000. This year it will also be $200,000. It's something that the voters vote on every year. It's not a guarantee, but we definitely recommend it because it funds this plan and helps eliminate spikes and valleys. The second component is each year we have $100,000 that we have embedded in our operating budget. And we use that money for smaller projects, to get out in front of things, to do painting, to do repairs, and those types of things within our buildings, so that we don't get to a place where we have a piece of equipment that fails because it hasn't been properly maintained. So those are kind of the two levers we have. It also ties into our facilities management plan. You may recall a couple years ago, due to COVID and staffing, we weren't able to find enough people to work in our facilities. We had custodians, and we had a lead custodian in each building. And so we had to get creative. It was in the middle of COVID. We had heightened disinfection routines we had to do, and we were understaffed to start with. We wound up outsourcing our custodial services. And what we did is we converted no one lost their job. We converted all of our existing staff into something called a facilities technician. And we've invested over the last 3 years a lot of time in training those people. So what we used to have to call the plumber to do, we have these auto flush toilets, we used to have to call them to come and replace it. We now have a group of people that are trained, and we do it in-house now. We used to have to hire a painter to come in and when we needed to do a lot of painting or things. Now we do that, we have one of our gentlemen loves painting. He does painting all the time in the evenings, walks around and does that. We used to pay somebody, our HVAC maintenance people, to change all the filters in all of our equipment. We now do that in-house. So what we've seen over time is that by doing those preventative maintenance things in-house and deploying that money there, using our staff to do it, we can do it at a much more cost-effective rate than outsourcing those things. And we're starting to really see that and feel that in our facilities model. We pay for the custodial services, and we just put that out to bid recently. The board just accepted it. We have a new company that will be coming on in July. And we were actually able to get we changed the scope of work because we're able to do some more things with our staff. And we were able to get a lower price for the next year than we're paying in the current year. So we're really seeing some gains from that. So what are, the two parts that we're talking about, we have a warrant article every year. That's for the long-term big stuff. The small stuff we're taking care of with our staff and within our budget. So that's kind of our short-term and our long-term plan. And as we move through this and we start to have some aspirational discussions about what do we want to see for the future, that's really more of the longer-term planning, capital facilities discussions. The board periodically has times where we have discussions where we're doing that as part of our budget process this year, talking about long-term aspirations. And then obviously the goal of all of this is that we want to avoid spikes and valleys in our tax rates, so we try and smooth things out. That chart that you see up there, that's basically showing you the projected capital needs funding for the district. And it's hard to see on your screen, but at the very, very bottom of that, there's little tiny a black piece at the bottom and then red on top. The black represents our annual short-term needs funding. That's that $100,000 that we do every year. And then the long-term needs going out to 2043 and 2044, if you can believe it, kind of shows the need over time. But what we've done with our planning is we've been able to make it so that we're just gradually building up in our accounts, then we draw it down to do our projects, then we build up again, but we always are mindful of our cash flow. And we think that by funding it the way we are, we will never get into a situation where we'll have to come back, well, we hope, we knock wood, but we'll never have to come back and say we've had a catastrophic failure of something and we need to raise and appropriate money in 1 year. We're hoping that by planning it out this way, we'll be able to smooth things out.
So just so I understand what the chart is saying, so it's saying in 24, 25, you need about 1.2 million in capital?
Yeah.
Basically, you've got a list of $1.2 million
Mhm.
of capital projects.
Yep.
24, 25.
Yep.
And you're expecting that you're actually going to do that, and then 25, 26, you're going to have a list of 1.5 million?
Well, no, it builds on top of each other. So we're just showing the long-term trend of the amount of money we're going to be able to allocate towards our facilities over time. So that it basically, in 1 year we spend a certain amount, but then the next year you add on the new money that we're spending, and it grows over time that we're able to avoid that.
So if I just looked at 24 to 34, it looks like what you're saying is that you need, $3.5 billion in funding to be spent during that period.
Yep. And our capital, our trust values, our trust accounts are how we're planning to do that. Like I said, we plan to fund a warrant article on our warrant every year in order to put money into that in accordance with the plan. And then if you can scroll down, Brian, there's another chart that I wanted to show that kind of talks about the different pieces. It's this chart right here. This basically is our long-term detailed plan. And it's hard for you to see. Again, I apologize from this distance, but on the left column, it tells you the task and what we think we're gonna need to spend money on. And then it shows you the years in which we are allocating to take on those projects. So every year, we sit down in the summer, we take a look at this list, and we reevaluate, did something jump ahead of something else? Or are we gonna defer something for a year because, we have new information? And we make that decision every year about how we move and shift those things. And I did talk with Dave Riley today before I came, because he's kind of the guru in determining what projects we work on, and if we have to make changes or why we make changes. And so, for example, we got this approved last year, but the funding had already been set for the year. So the projects that we initially had planned in that first year got bumped to 24, 25. So this year, we're going to be taking on the roofing. And we have a roof deck, a particular roof deck, the oldest part of the junior, senior high that we're going to be taking on. The classroom floors have all been done at this point at the elementary school. We now have replaced all the carpeting, so they all have a surface floor. We are tackling currently our windows, the last phase 2 of the window replacement at the elementary school. That will be happening this summer as well. We just put out an RFP. It actually came back in today. We're doing exterior wall repairs to some of our masonry. We had a big, went around and looked at all the places where we need to redo points and lentils and all of that. So that will also be done this summer. And classroom and bathroom fixtures, which we had initially kind of had on our longer term list, because of the reasons I talked to you about with our staff and the fact that we have some, we were able to do those things more efficiently in our operating budget. We've taken that off the long-term plan, and now we're addressing those things in our annual budget. So those are kind of the shifts and the decisions that, an example of how we look at it each year. So, and again, I apologize, I don't know how you can read it, I sure can't from here, but I will make sure that if you can share it with everybody so they can see it, that would be great. Does anyone have any questions on that?
So, is that's the total that you're looking to spend for capital improvement in 24, 20, or 25, the 725, 474?
Yep.
Okay, so you're not spending the one, you're, on the previous chart, and you had mentioned 1.2 million. So you're not actually spending 1.2, you're spending the 725, but you're trying to create and saving money.
Well, remember, this report doesn't show what we spent last year. So when we did that projected funding thing, last year we did do some things. So they don't show here because we've updated it for fiscal year 25. So this chart here doesn't take into consideration the work that we did in 23, 24.
Yeah,
So,
I think another way to say it is that that other chart is cumulative over time.
yeah,
Right.
So,
Yeah, but it does show 1.2 million being spent 24, 25. I guess what you're saying is the
It is-
remaining portion that was spent in 24,
right. So
725 of it
it's
is being spent in
it's
24.
cumulative, and so
So it's about 475, 500,000 spent in 24, and then you
Right.
add the 725.
Right.
That's the 25.
And again, keep in mind that includes the stuff that's in our operating budget. There's a little tiny black part at the bottom that we have every year in our operating budget. And so because that really is needed to maintain our facilities, we add that into our total lift of what we're doing.
So if you take the 100,000, you take that 100,000 every year, so you have $1 million there.
Yep.
You're talking about, over a 10-year period, 3.5 million, so you have $2.5 million. If you're funding what you're saying you need over that period of
Yep.
time, or $250,000 a year. If you're
Yeah,
gonna take it level.
not level, but yeah,
Yeah,
that,
if you take it level, you're gonna
Yep.
$250,000 every single
Yep.
year. And that's in your budget.
well, $100,000 a year is in the budget, but we put a warrant article on every year this year it'll be 200,000, last year it was 200,000. So we have a plan that we go back to the taxpayers and we say, hey, this supports our capital reserve plan. So, and what that money does, there are sometimes, like this is a heavy year for us, but then next year in 2026, we're looking at spending 162,000.
Right.
So it's not, and then 2028 right now, we don't have any expenditures planned.
Yeah, then you can
So
bump up
it
to
just goes
half.
up and down based on when those projects
Yep.
hit the docket. This one is a bigger year because we got a late start. We didn't have the funding last year to do like the windows and such, so.
And you can't bring in capital to level load it. So you've got, if you look there, you've got a couple of years where there's not much, and actually you've got about a 4 or 5 year period.
Right.
Where you're only talking about, on average, about 20,000 a year.
Right, and that's what we're still gonna be asking for the warrant article during those periods, because we know we have some big years coming up down the road. So we're asking for the warrant article, we're trying to make a set amount that we ask for every year, knowing that we're gonna have some years that we don't spend a whole lot, but that down the road, we're gonna have a big year, and we don't wanna have to come back and ask for the
And
money.
you're permitted to hold a cash capital reserve.
Well, in a capital reserve account, yes.
Yeah.
That's the vehicle for doing that.
It's also accruing interest that
Yep.
time as well, yeah.
Yep, the trust funds actually did quite well this year. They changed to a town, I guess it's not the town. The trustees chose a new investment partner, Cambridge Trust this year, and so we did much better in our trust funds than we have in the past. Okay, any other questions on the capital reserve? All right.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, well, thank you. Have a good rest of your meeting.
All right. Okay,
There, do it right from here.
pardon me?
Should I head up there or do it right from here?
Whatever you'd like to do. I think we're informal enough. Okay, so Brian Rowley's going to take control and talk to
Okay.
us about the town CIP program.
All right, so I'd like to give a special thanks to Rich Lesavoy for essentially making the content of these slides from a PDF in previous years. So I learned a lot reading through his presentation and participating in the committee and reading through some of the RSAs. So we're just going to take a quick overview of what the capital improvement program is, get into the legal framework around that, and then start to look at Newmarket specific process, and then just a real quick overview of the next 6 years for kind of what the town's been looking through. And this is going to be focused on the town because the intention was to have met with both the town and the school prior to today's meeting, but unfortunately there's been some scheduling challenges with the school, and we're looking at doing that in November now. So, capital improvement program, the overall goal is to prepare and amend a program of municipal capital improvement projects projected over a period of at least 6 years. It's defined in the statutes 674, 5 through 8, and you know, as Jana was saying, it has a number of benefits. I mean, I think there's some intangibles like letting department heads and school board bodies plan where they want to go. Big thing that the town's talking about right now is tighter integration with the master plan and really helping achieve the community goals, leveling out kind of tax rates and things like that through long-term planning. And, you know, as this graphic on the right shows, it kind of links together land use, infrastructure, and the town's goals for economic development through the capital improvement program. The legal framework that kind of buttresses all this is actually pretty open in how it lets each municipality do this. But you know, the first piece is about authorization, and in order for a municipality to have a capital improvement program in place, there must also be a master plan prior to that. And this article also provides for and defines, you know, a CIP committee. Some towns might have it done directly through the planning board. Ours has created a committee. The purpose and description around the capital improvement program, it's required by law that the, you know, as part of the program, that the projects are classified by urgency and need, and that the committee or, you know, planning board, whatever it might be for the town, in our case again, the committee recommend project implementation timing. and that it be generated from information provided by departments, and that it account for the master plan, land use controls, overall the vision for the town. The next statute defines the CIP committee, and that it will review capital improvements with the municipal departments and school board in partnership, and that it's an advisory board. The actual title of 6748 is consideration by mayor and budget committee, but again, we don't have a mayor here. In this case, it's town manager and the council, and stresses that it's an advisory body. And then 67421 doesn't actually define the framework of the CIP, but it does note that for an impact fee, which Jana was mentioning, a fee to offset development in the town, and any kind of encumbrances coming from that development, whether it's more people in town, more demand on public facilities. In order to assess those impact fees, the municipality must have a CIP in place as a requirement for assessing those fees. So in Newmarket, the CIP is guided by the town's master plan, which represents the collective vision, and it's part of the budget process from town manager, town council and budget committee, CIP committee, and communication kind of flowing through all those channels. The town charter establishes the capital improvement program committee, representation from the council, planning board, budget committee, school board, and at-large members. It has essentially been granted all the powers listed under the statutes we talked about, and is charged with preparing or really reviewing and making final recommendations to the requests made by the town and school board. The CIP process here is initiated with a request to the department heads and the school for capital project and equipment requests. These have to be by law a minimum of 6 years, but they can be further out. As we saw in Jan's presentation, they went out 20 some odd years. After these have been generated, all the requests are aggregated. The CIP committee reviews that information in partnership with the requesters, and renders a recommendation on fund allocation, timing, or an urgency designation. And those recommendations are then forwarded on to the town manager and council. This is just, in case anybody hasn't seen it, what the Newmarket CIP request form looks like. And this is all available on the minutes from the October meeting that we had. September meeting that we had. And so this is just an example of one of the requests coming in from the town. There are two types of requests that can be made. There's a capital project, which is defined as a project undertaken to enhance the infrastructure and public facilities of the town, and it must have a useful life of more than 10 years and cost at least $50,000. Capital equipment, a tangible item that is not a recurring purchase and has a useful life of more than 3 years with a cost of $10,000. This just is an overview of the different prioritization codes used. Urgent, compulsory, necessary, and desirable. I think mostly self-explanatory, but different levels of flexibility in how you can proceed with those requests based on this categorization. And then getting into this, the current program that's being reviewed, FY25 to FY23. So this meeting was held on September 11th. The school CIP meeting is still being scheduled, but is expected in November. The report gives details on every request. There wasn't a large number of new requests, and the total requested amount between the general funds and enterprise funds was about 1.8 million, which the committee recommended as requested. Some of the kind of other key notes that I felt were important to bring up, and again, this is all available in the minutes from that meeting. Recreation did have a new request about the Bolio playground potentially being moved to Shopmeyer Park or being updated. It's about at the end of its useful life, and it's also out of step with current regulations around playgrounds. So too many big tree branches hanging overhead, too many exposed stone, so at the time they built it, that was no problem. Things have changed, and now if that were to, they were to replace the equipment, that would all have to be remediated. No new requests from Public Works, no new requests from police. So there are requests, but they are just part of the previous, year's requests that this committee has seen before. There was a robust discussion about fire department vehicle leases appearing in the CIP versus the operating budget. And that, I think was determined to be discussed further at a later meeting. I think most folks here are familiar with that conversation. And to me, I think the really biggest takeaway from all of this is that, we're on track to have an updated master plan rolling out pretty soon. I think that the hope is this is going to be really tightly integrated with the CIP going forward. It's going to provide a more robust guidance on how to implement these projects, how, goals for the department heads to use as they're making their requests and to guide the requests that they make, and just overall a better framework for justifying these costs and projects. Once that master plan is rolled out, the intent is going to be that this committee would meet quarterly with department heads, and be a much more frequent contact point than has been this year. So, yeah, I hope that was a helpful and quick overview. Again, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, that's all in the CIP minutes there. But, yeah, appreciate the time.
I do have one question. We've been talking about this fire vehicle piece for, I've been on the committee now, budget committee for 4 years. I think it's been a topic of conversation every single year.
Every single time.
And there seems to be no change. So we're really not building reserve to purchase fire equipment. We're just expensing it as it comes along. Is there a plan to change that?
So a plan wasn't addressed at that meeting. My perception was that it was a fairly sensitive topic, and
I think we all detected that the last time we brought it up. Yeah. As well.
And essentially, I think the way the committee overall wants to proceed is to just keep having that conversation to try to influence a long-term change. But in the immediate, my understanding is there isn't a plan to
We were talking about the previous
change that.
soft no?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what, we're back to that.
I hope that
Yeah,
answers the
maybe a
question.
little harder than that.
Sure seems it, yep. Yep.
So, when do they expect to actually submit the complete report?
I think we'd have to get through the school piece and then shortly after that, so
Yeah.
just depends when we can get a quorum. I think poor Bart's been trying now since early October, and every week we don't make quorum, so currently the last email thread was November 6th for that meeting, and I think shortly thereafter.
So once that's completed, you'll be able to provide us with whatever the final,
Yeah.
like a digi file of that, so we can all read it
Yep.
carefully
I'll
and completely.
report back on that, and happy to grab the overall report, which is really nicely detailed and laid out, for 25 to 31 for all the town items. So
That's a lot of information there.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
great to
is.
see that. Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you. Right, so the next item is approval of the September 30th minutes. And I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to at least look through them. Any comments? Any questions? How about a motion to accept them?
I motion to accept.
Okay, Ned Carpenter makes a motion to accept the minutes as prepared. Second? Thank you, Brian. Brian Ward, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And one abstention from Danielle.
Chris, I
Yes.
wasn't here either.
Pardon me?
I was not here.
You were not there. Right, sorry, okay, so 2 abstentions, one with Brian and one with Danielle. And otherwise it passes, so thank you very much. What I will be, just a couple housekeeping items here before we go. I intended to provide you with the calendar for the remainder of the set of the committee's work. I will send that to you by email and all before I leave, and right, so you'll be able to see that. But basically, the next meeting is November 25th. We expect to hear from the town on Q1, and then after that, in December, we basically have 2 sessions a month, December and January, to work through all of this with the expectation that we'll have it completed by the 23rd. But we have to have it completed by the 23rd of January. Okay? All right, any questions? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Brian Ward to adjourn, second by Danielle, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So much.